So my father just died. So what? Go serve the 30 people at the dinner? Stop your whining. Patrick's words pierced my chest like sharp knives. My son, my own son, was screaming at me like this, barely 24 hours after we had buried Arthur, the love of my life, the man who had been my partner for 47 years. My hands trembled as I held the apron he had thrown in my face minutes earlier. I was 72 years old, Eleanor Sterling, and I never imagined the day would come when my own son would treat me worse than a hired housekeeper. The house was filled with voices, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Patrick had organized a business meeting, an important dinner with his partners and clients, just the day after his father's funeral. "Business doesn't wait, Mom," he had told me coldly that morning, as if my grief were a minor inconvenience in his schedule. I was still wearing the black dress from the wake, my eyes swollen from crying so much, and he was demanding that I put on this apron and wait on 30 strangers as if nothing had happened. "You didn't hear me!" Patrick shouted again, approaching me with his face red with rage. "I have important guests waiting. Move it. The food isn't going to serve itself." His voice echoed in the kitchen, the place that had been my sanctuary for so many years, where Arthur and I had shared thousands of morning coffees, where we had planned our dreams and celebrated every small victory. Now that space felt foreign, hostile, as if my own home had turned into a prison. Caroline, Patrick's wife, appeared in the kitchen doorway with a mocking smile on her lips. She was wearing a bright red dress, completely inappropriate considering we were in mourning, and her heels clicked against the tile floor with every calculated step. "Eleanor, the appetizers should already be on the table. What are you waiting for? A special invitation?" Her tone was sweet, but the words dripped with poison. She had learned well from my son how to treat me with contempt disguised as politeness. "Caroline, please, I need a moment," I managed to say, my voice cracking. I could still smell the funeral lilies on my clothes. I could still feel the weight of Arthur's casket on my shoulders as I watched it descend into the earth. How could they ask me to smile and serve hors d'oeuvres as if nothing had happened? Arthur just... The words got stuck in my throat, choked by the tears I fought to hold back. "Arthur, what?" Patrick interrupted abruptly, snatching the tray from my hands. "Dad is gone, Mom. He is gone. Life goes on, and you have responsibilities here. This house needs to be maintained. These guests are important for my business, and you are going to pitch in whether you want to or not." He shoved the tray back into my trembling hands with a sharp thud. "Now get out there and do your job. And please, try not to look so pathetic. Nobody wants to see an old lady crying while they eat dinner." Every word was a slap in the face. My son, the boy I had carried in my arms, whom I had nursed through entire nights when he was sick, who had gotten his degree thanks to the hard work of Arthur and myself, was now talking to me as if I were garbage. Caroline let out a little giggle and turned around, her heels marking her triumphant exit. "Hurry up, Eleanor. The guests are getting impatient." I walked out of the kitchen with shaky legs, holding the tray of appetizers as if it weighed tons. The dining room was packed with strangers, men in expensive suits and women with sparkling jewelry, all chatting animatedly, completely oblivious to my pain. The large table, the one Arthur had bought 20 years ago when we still dreamed of family gatherings full of love and happy grandchildren, was now occupied by strangers who didn't even look at me when I approached to offer them food. "Ma'am, these appetizers are cold," complained one of the guests, a heavy-set man with a mustache who didn't even look up from his cell phone to speak to me. "Bring me some others, but make sure they are hot this time." There was no please. There was no consideration whatsoever. I was invisible to them, just a service object. I returned to the kitchen with slow steps, feeling every muscle in my body protest. The pain of grief mixed with physical exhaustion and emotional humiliation. I hadn't slept in 2 days. I hadn't eaten almost anything, and now they were demanding I work like a machine with no feelings. In the kitchen, Patrick was checking his phone impatiently. "What are you doing here again? Did you serve everything already?" The appetizers were cold. I tried to explain, but he cut me off immediately. "Of course they were cold, because you move at a snail's pace. Mom, tonight is crucial for me. I have a $50,000 deal on the line. Do you understand? $50,000. So I need you to put your sad widow drama aside and focus." He leaned in close to me, his face inches from mine, and I could see something in his eyes that froze my blood. There was no love, no compassion, only irritation and pure selfishness. Dad is dead. He is not coming back, but I am alive, and this family needs money, so move it. I went back to the dining room with a fresh tray, my eyes burning with the tears I refused to shed in front of those strangers. Caroline was sitting at the head of the table, in the spot where Arthur always sat, laughing with a blonde woman wearing an excessively flashy pearl necklace. When she saw me pass, Caroline snapped her fingers. "Eleanor, bring more wine. The bottle at table 3 is empty." I obeyed in silence, moving between the tables like a ghost. I could feel some glances from the guests, but none of compassion. Some looked at me with indifference, others with annoyance when I wasn't fast enough. An elegant woman with her hair in a perfect bun stopped me with a gesture of her hand. "Excuse me, do you have anything gluten-free? I have celiac disease, and I cannot eat any of this." "Me? I will prepare something," I murmured, though I had no idea what I could offer her. My mind was clouded by exhaustion and grief. "Hurry up then!" exclaimed the woman impatiently. "I don't have all night." I returned to the kitchen once more, and this time my legs could barely support me. I leaned against the counter, breathing with difficulty, trying to find strength in some corner of my exhausted being. Photographs of Arthur and me hung on the kitchen wall, memories of happier times, our wedding, Patrick's birth, vacations at the beach. What had gone wrong? At what moment had my son turned into this cruel and heartless man? "What are you doing standing there like a statue?" Caroline's voice startled me. She had entered silently, and now she looked at me with her arms crossed and an expression of total disdain. "Patrick asked me to come see why you are taking so long. There are people waiting." "Caroline, I need just a moment to what? To cry? To feel sorry for yourself?" She walked up to me, her eyes shining with cruelty. "Look, Eleanor, I know you lost your husband. I get it, really, but life goes on, and Patrick has important plans. Plans that include this house, these contacts, this business. And frankly, your dramatic attitude isn't helping at all." She took a glass of wine from the tray and took a sip before continuing. "If you can't handle this, maybe you should consider moving to a place more appropriate for someone your age. A nursing home, perhaps." Her words hit me like a punch to the stomach. A nursing home? Was Caroline suggesting they kick me out of my own house? This house that Arthur and I had bought with so much effort, that we had filled with memories and love for decades. "This is my house," I managed to say with a thread of a voice. "Technically," replied Caroline with a cold smile. "This house has been in Patrick's name for 3 years. Did you not know? Arthur signed the papers when he was sick. So no, Eleanor, this is no longer your house. It is my husband's house, and you are here because of his generosity." The world wobbled around me. It couldn't be true. Arthur would never have done something like that without telling me. He never would have left me unprotected, without a secure home. But Caroline's triumphant smile told me she wasn't lying, or at least that she firmly believed what she was saying. My knees threatened to give way under my weight, and I had to hold on to the edge of the counter to keep from falling to the floor. "Arthur, no, he wouldn't do that," I whispered, more to myself than to her. "Well, he did," replied Caroline in a carefree tone, examining her perfectly painted deep red nails. "So I suggest you reconsider your attitude. Patrick is being very generous by allowing you to stay here, especially considering how useless you have become lately." She left the empty glass in my hands. "Now get back to the dining room. And this time, try to smile a little. You look like a walking corpse." Caroline left the kitchen with the same arrogance with which she had entered, leaving me alone with my shattered thoughts and my heart broken into pieces. Was it possible that Arthur had transferred the house to Patrick's name? During his illness, the last 6 months before he died, he had been so weak, so vulnerable. Patrick had insisted on handling all the legal and financial matters, saying that Dad needed to rest and not worry about paperwork. I had trusted my son. I had believed he was taking care of his father with love and responsibility. Had it all been manipulation? Tears finally rolled down my cheeks, silent but relentless. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, leaving dark smudges from the mascara I had worn for the funeral. I couldn't afford to collapse now. Not with 30 people waiting in the dining room. Not with Patrick watching my every move like a hawk. I breathed deeply, trying to find the strength Arthur always said I had, that fortitude that had helped me overcome so many difficulties in our life together. I loaded another tray with freshly poured glasses of wine and returned to the dining room. The noise of the conversations hit me like a wave. Everyone was talking about business, investments, million-dollar figures, while I glided among them like a shadow, invisible and disposable. A tall man with gray hair stopped me with a brusque gesture of his hand. "Hey, lady, this wine is terrible. Don't you have something better? Something that costs more than $20 at least." "Me? I will go check," I responded automatically, although I knew Arthur had a collection of excellent wines in the basement cellar. Wines we had saved for special occasions, for family celebrations that never came because Patrick was always too busy to visit us. "Mom." Patrick's voice resonated from the other end of the dining room. He was standing next to a group of men in suits, and he was signaling me impatiently. "Come here. I need you to bring Dad cigars. They are in his study, in the top drawer of the desk. Arthur's study, the sacred place where he spent hours reading, working, dreaming. A space I had avoided since his death because every object in there reminded me of his absence in an unbearable way. But Patrick was ordering me to go, and I didn't have the strength to resist. I left the tray on a side table and headed toward the hallway, my steps slow and heavy. The study was exactly as Arthur had left it. His robe hung from the back of the leather chair, his books were stacked on the desk, his reading glasses rested on a document half-reviewed. The smell of his cologne still floated faintly in the air, mixing with the scent of wood and old paper. I closed the door behind me and allowed myself a moment of weakness, resting my forehead against the cold wood of the desk while I sobbed in silence. "Arthur, my love, what do I do now?" I whispered to the empty room. Our son has become a stranger. He treats me as if I were garbage, as if everything we did for him meant nothing." My fingers caressed the surface of the desk, tracing the same lines I had seen Arthur touch thousands of times. "I feel so lost without you, so alone." I opened the top drawer where Patrick had said the cigars were, and sure enough, there they were. An elegant wooden box with Cuban cigars that Arthur kept for very special occasions. But there was something else in the drawer. A thick manila envelope with my name written in Arthur's unmistakable handwriting. "For Eleanor. Open only in case of emergency." My heart began to beat wildly. What was this? Why had Arthur left this here without telling me anything? My hands trembled as I took the envelope, but before I could open it, the study door flew open. Patrick was there, his face red with fury. "What the hell are you doing? I asked you for the cigars 5 minutes ago. You are deaf, as well as useless." I quickly hid the envelope behind my back, an instinct of protection I couldn't explain. "I'm coming, Patrick. You were just wasting time, as always." He entered the study with aggressive steps and snatched the cigar box from my hands. "You know what, Mom? I am tired. Tired of your dramas. Tired of your slowness. Tired of having to drag you around to get things done. Dad spoiled you too much during all these years, and now I have to deal with the result." "Patrick, I am your mother," I said with a trembling voice, feeling the envelope pressed against my back. "I just lost the love of my life. Can't you have a little compassion?" "Compassion." He laughed bitterly. "Mom, Dad died yesterday. It's true. But do you know what else is true? That he left a mountain of debts that now I have to pay. This dinner, these guests, are my opportunity to close a deal that will give us $70,000. $70,000 that we desperately need. So forgive me if I don't have time for therapy sessions and dramatic crying." Debts? Arthur had never mentioned debts. He had always been careful with money, responsible to the extreme. "I didn't know there were debts," I murmured. "Of course you didn't know," replied Patrick with sarcasm. "Because Dad protected you from everything, kept you in a pink bubble where everything was perfect and beautiful. But the reality is different, Mom. The reality is that this house has a mortgage of $150,000, that Dad's medical treatments cost us a fortune, and that now I am the only one who can save this situation." He stepped closer to me, his breath smelling of whiskey. "So you are going to get out of this study. You are going to go back to the dining room, and you are going to do your job without complaints." Understood. He didn't wait for my answer. He simply turned around and left the study, taking the cigars and leaving me trembling against the desk. As soon as I heard his footsteps fading down the hallway, I pulled the envelope from behind my back. My clumsy fingers struggled with the seal, but I finally managed to open it. Inside were several folded documents and a handwritten letter from Arthur. My dearest Eleanor. The letter began with his elegant handwriting, but shaky from the illness. If you are reading this, it means something is wrong. It means Patrick is not behaving like the man I hoped he would be. My love, there are things you need to know, things I have kept secret to protect you, but that now must come to light. My eyes flew over the following lines, absorbing every word with growing astonishment and confusion. Arthur spoke of investments, of properties, of bank accounts that I knew nothing about. He mentioned a man, Samuel Bennett, his lawyer and trusted friend. Samuel has precise instructions, Arthur wrote. He knows what to do and when to do it. Trust him, my love. Trust that I will protect you even from beyond the grave. A loud bang on the door made me jump. Eleanor. It was Caroline's shrill voice. Patrick says to come out of there immediately. The guests are asking about dessert. I quickly folded the letter and the documents, putting them back into the envelope. I couldn't let Patrick or Caroline see this. Whatever it was, I looked for a place to hide it, and finally tucked it inside my apron, pressing it against my stomach. I left the study with trembling legs, feeling the weight of the envelope against my body as if it were a burning secret threatening to consume me. Caroline was waiting for me in the hallway, tapping the floor with her heel impatiently, her arms crossed over her chest, and an expression of total annoyance on her face. Are you always this slow, or are you making a special effort today to ruin Patrick's night? I didn't answer. I no longer had the strength to argue with her, and besides, my mind was too busy processing what I had just read in Arthur's letter. What investments? What properties? Why had he never told me about any of that? During 47 years of marriage, we had shared everything, or at least that's what I thought. Now I was discovering that my husband had kept secrets, and although his letter promised it was to protect me, I couldn't help but feel betrayed and confused. The dessert is in the large refrigerator, I said in a monotone voice as I walked back toward the kitchen. Caroline followed me closely, her heels marking every step like little hammers against my sanity. I could feel her eyes fixed on my back, evaluating me, judging me, probably calculating how much longer she would have to endure my presence in this house that now, according to her, belonged to Patrick. In the kitchen, I opened the refrigerator and began to take out the individual portions of tiramisu I had prepared the day before. Before the funeral, when I still had a thread of hope that Patrick would show some humanity. How naive I had been. Every portion was perfectly presented in glass cups, decorated with cocoa powder and a fresh mint leaf. I had spent hours preparing them, seeking in the kitchen a distraction from the unbearable pain consuming me inside. "Hurry up," ordered Caroline, leaning against the doorframe. "Patrick is entertaining the guests with stories, but he can only hold their attention for so long. He needs the service to be impeccable if he wants to close that contract." She paused and then added with venom in her voice, "Although with a maid as old and clumsy as you, I don't know how he expects to impress anyone." I ignored her comment and placed 12 dessert cups on a large tray. The envelope inside my apron moved slightly with every movement, reminding me of its presence, whispering promises of answers I didn't yet understand. Samuel Bennett. That name resonated vaguely in my memory. Arthur had mentioned him a few times over the years, always with respect and appreciation, but I had never met him personally. I lifted the tray and headed to the dining room once more. My arms protested the weight, my shoulders burned with exhaustion, but I kept going. The dining room was even noisier than before. The alcohol had loosened the guests' tongues, and now they spoke louder, laughed more heartily. Some had even started smoking, even though I never allowed cigarettes inside the house. Patrick was in the center of a group, gesturing broadly as he told some anecdote, his face lit up with a fake smile he had perfected for his business deals. I began to distribute the desserts among the tables, moving carefully so as not to trip over the chairs that had been moved carelessly by the guests. A woman with too much makeup and an excessively tight gold dress stopped me with abrupt gesture. "This dessert has coffee, right? I can't drink coffee after 6 in the evening, or I won't sleep all night." "It is tiramisu, ma'am," I explained with forced patience. It has a little coffee, yes. Then I don't want it. Bring me something else. Do you have flan? I love flan. The woman pushed the cup of tiramisu toward the edge of the table with disdain, as if the dessert had personally offended her. I can see what is in the kitchen, I murmured, feeling the humiliation piling onto my shoulders like layers of lead. Well, go then, said the woman impatiently. I don't have all night. I returned to the kitchen with tired steps, leaving the tray on the counter with more force than necessary. There was no flan. There was nothing else prepared. Patrick had given me specific instructions about the menu, and I had followed every detail to the letter, despite my emotional state. And now what was I supposed to do? Invent a dessert out of thin air? Any problem? Patrick's voice startled me. He had entered the kitchen silently and now looked at me with a mixture of irritation and suspicion. I saw you run back. What happened now? A lady wants flan and I don't. We don't have flan. She will have to settle for the tiramisu like everyone else. Patrick walked closer to me, and for the first time all night, his expression softened slightly. For a moment, just for a second, I thought maybe my son was still there, buried under all that cruelty. Mom, I know this is hard for you. I know, but I need you to hang in there a little longer. Just a couple more hours and it will all be over. Patrick, your father, I began, but he raised a hand to silence me. Please, no, not now. We will have time to talk about Dad later. Tonight is important for our future. To keep this house, to pay the debts he left. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture he used to make when he was stressed, a gesture he had inherited from Arthur. After tonight, things will get better. I promise you. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that my son still had a heart, that all this was simply the stress of the situation, that eventually he would go back to being the boy I knew. But there was something in his eyes, something cold and calculating, that made me doubt. I nodded silently, and he walked away, leaving me alone once again in the kitchen that no longer felt like my home. I prepared a small portion of fresh fruit with whipped cream, improvising an alternative dessert for the demanding woman. When I returned to the dining room with it, the woman in the gold dress was already entertained in an animated conversation and barely looked at me when I placed the plate in front of her. Not even a thank you, just a dismissive gesture of her hand, indicating for me to withdraw. I continued serving desserts, collecting empty plates, refilling wine glasses. Every minute felt like an hour, every hour like an eternity. My feet burned inside my shoes, my back protested with every movement, and the envelope in my apron seemed to get heavier with every step. When could I read it completely? When would I have a moment of privacy to understand what it was that Arthur had wanted to tell me? Near 10 at night, when I thought finally the guests would start to leave, Patrick announced that it was time for serious business. The men retired to the living room, leaving the women in the dining room chatting about fashion, travel, and society gossip. Caroline sat with them as if she were the queen of the place, laughing loudly, telling stories about exotic places she had visited, jewelry Patrick had bought her. And your mother-in-law? Asked one of the women, a redhead with crimson lips. Does she live here with you guys? Caroline let out an awkward laugh. Well, yes, for now. Eleanor became a widow yesterday, so Patrick and I decided it would be cruel to kick her out immediately. We are giving her time to adjust to her new situation. How generous of you two, commented another woman in a flattering tone. Not everyone would have the patience to take care of a mother-in-law. It is temporary, Caroline assured quickly, as if the idea of me living there permanently were absolutely unacceptable. We are looking for an appropriate place for her, a residence for seniors. You know, a place where she can be with people her age, where she receives the care she needs. I was standing just 6 feet away from them, collecting empty glasses, and they talked about me as if I were invisible, as if I couldn't hear them planning my banishment from my own house. My hands gripped the edge of the tray so hard my knuckles turned white. A residence for seniors, a nursing home. They wanted to take me out of my home, from the place where I had built my entire life together with Arthur, where every corner held a memory of our love. Anger began to bubble inside my chest, mixing with the pain and humiliation I had been accumulating all night. Eleanor, are you deaf? Caroline's sharp voice snapped me out of my thoughts. I asked you for more wine 5 minutes ago. What are you waiting for? A written invitation? I'm going, I replied with a tense voice, turning toward the kitchen before they could see the tears threatening to escape my eyes. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. I wouldn't let them see how much they were destroying me. As I walked down the hallway, the envelope in my apron seemed to burn against my skin, reminding me that Arthur had left something, some message, some protection for me. In the kitchen, I leaned against the refrigerator and closed my eyes, breathing deeply. The house was full of strange voices, of laughter that didn't include me, of conversations about business and money that didn't concern me. I felt like an intruder in my own home. How had it come to this? At what moment had my life crumbled so completely? I took 2 bottles of wine from the small cabinet where Arthur kept his collection, wines he had selected carefully over the years. Patrick was serving them to his guests as if they were water, with no consideration for the sentimental value of each bottle. Arthur had bought that Argentine Malbec during our 40th anniversary. He had saved that Spanish Rioja since the day Patrick graduated from college. Every bottle had a story, a special moment, and now they were being consumed by strangers who didn't even appreciate what they were drinking. I returned to the dining room with the bottles and began to serve. One of the women, a brunette with an excessively large diamond necklace, stopped me with an imperious gesture. "Hey lady, how much does this wine cost? My husband and I are thinking of investing in wines, and I would like to know." "It is a 2010 Reserva Malbec," I replied automatically. "It costs around $200 a bottle." The woman whistled with appreciation. "Wow, Patrick spares no expense. Caroline is lucky to have such a generous husband." She looked me up and down with a certain curiosity. "And you are Patrick's mother? You must be very proud of him." The words got stuck in my throat. Proud? Of a son who treated me like garbage? Of a man who was planning to lock me in a nursing home? "Yes," I finally managed to say. "I am his mother." "How wonderful to have a successful son," continued the woman, completely oblivious to my internal torment. "My oldest son is a mess, still lives with us at 35, but Patrick, he really turned out to be an entrepreneur. Caroline was telling me about his new real estate project. They are going to make a fortune." Real estate project? It was the first time I heard about that. Patrick had never mentioned anything to me. But of course, why would he tell me? I was just a hindrance in his life, a burden he had to endure until he could get rid of me. From the living room came raised male voices, not in argument but in enthusiasm. It seemed Patrick's negotiations were going well. Caroline stood up from her seat with a triumphant smile. "Excuse me, ladies. I think my husband just closed an important deal. I am going to congratulate him." She walked away with her heels clicking victoriously, leaving me alone with the women who had now lost interest in talking to me and had returned to their own gossip. I seized the moment to slip back into the kitchen. I needed a break, even if it was just for a minute. I needed to process everything that was happening. I left the empty bottles on the counter and pulled the envelope from my apron with trembling hands. I unfolded Arthur's letter once more and continued reading where I had left off. "Eleanor, my love," the letter continued, "I have built something much bigger than Patrick imagines. There are properties in your name, investments I made in secret to protect our future. The house he believes he controls is only a small part of everything. Samuel has the real documents, the true property titles. Patrick signed papers he thought gave him the house, but what he actually signed was a temporary transfer while I was alive. Now that I have departed, everything reverts to you automatically." My heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. Was it possible? Had Arthur protected our assets from Patrick? I continued reading avidly. "There are 3 more properties. A condo downtown that generates monthly rents of $4,000, a commercial space rented to a pharmacy for $3,500 a month, and a house on the coast that is worth approximately $500,000. There are also savings accounts in 3 different banks, with a total of $320,000. Everything is in your name, my love. It was always in your name." Tears ran freely down my cheeks now, but they were different tears, not of sadness or humiliation, but of astonishment and gratitude. Arthur had protected me, even knowing he was dying. Even in his weakest moments, he had thought of me and ensured my future. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered to the paper, as if he could hear me. "Why did you keep this secret?" The answer was in the next paragraph. I didn't tell you because I wanted to protect you from Patrick's claws. My love. Our son changed. I don't know when or how it happened, but the sweet boy we raised turned into an ambitious and cruel man. During my illness, he tried to convince me to sign everything over to his name. He pressured me constantly. He even threatened to cut off my access to medical treatments if I didn't cooperate. I signed some papers to give him temporary peace, but Samuel made sure they were documents with no real value. Forgive me for not telling you, but I didn't want you to carry that anguish while I was dying. A sob escaped my throat. Patrick had threatened his own dying father. How was such evil possible? How could a son fall so low? My hands were trembling so much I almost dropped the letter, but I forced myself to keep reading. Samuel will come when necessary. He knows what to do. Trust him. Eleanor, you are not alone. You will never be alone. My last act of love is to make sure you have everything you need to live with dignity and security. Patrick cannot take anything from you because nothing is his. The house, the money, the properties, everything is yours. It was always yours. I love you, my dear wife. I will love you for all eternity. Your Arthur. I pressed the letter against my chest, sobbing silently in the empty kitchen. Arthur had loved me until the end. Even in death, he was still taking care of me, protecting me. But now came the crucial question. When would this Samuel appear? How would he know that I needed help? I checked the other documents in the envelope. There were copies of property titles, bank statements, all with my name clearly visible. Patrick had been lying to me. Caroline had been lying to me. The house was mine. Everything was mine. Eleanor, Patrick's voice made me jump. I quickly stuffed the documents back into the envelope and hid it in the apron just as he entered the kitchen. His face was lit up with a genuine smile, the first I had seen on him in years. I did it, Mom. I closed the deal, $70,000 secured. This is going to change everything. For a moment, just a brief moment, I thought about telling him the truth. I thought about taking out the documents and showing him that everything he had planned was a lie, that he had no control over anything. But something stopped me. Maybe it was survival instinct. Maybe it was the wisdom that comes with age. Or maybe it was simply that I wanted to see how far Patrick would go with his lies. I kept quiet and simply nodded, forcing a small smile on my tired lips. I am happy for you, son, I said in a neutral voice, though inside a mixture of contradictory emotions boiled. I need you to bring champagne, ordered Patrick, his joy instantly transforming into a demand. The good stuff, the one Dad kept for special occasions. It is in the basement cellar, on the back shelf. I have to toast with my partners. He didn't wait for my answer. He simply turned around and returned to the living room, whistling a cheerful tune. The basement, the place where Arthur kept his most precious treasures. Select wines, quality champagne, important documents in his personal safe. I went down the stairs slowly, turning on the lights as I descended. The air was cool and slightly damp, smelling of old wood and the herbs Arthur grew in pots near the small window. This had been his secret refuge, the place where he came to think, to plan, to dream. I found the bottles of champagne on the shelf Patrick had mentioned. Moet and Chandon, 2 bottles Arthur had bought to celebrate our 50th anniversary, an anniversary that would now never arrive. I took the bottles with careful hands, feeling the cold weight of the glass against my palms. Patrick would use them to celebrate his success, not knowing that success was built on lies and that soon everything would crumble around him. As I was going up the stairs, I heard the doorbell ring. Someone had arrived. Through the hallway, I could see Patrick opening the door, his expression confused. He wasn't expecting more guests. From my position on the basement stairs, I could only partially see the entrance, but I heard a deep and firm male voice that made my heart stop for a second. Good evening. I am Samuel Bennett, attorney at law. I am here to see Mrs. Eleanor Sterling. Samuel, the man Arthur had mentioned in his letter, the ally who would come when necessary. He had arrived. My legs almost gave way under my weight from the combination of relief and nervousness. I climbed the last steps and stood at the end of the hallway, watching the scene unfolding in the entrance. Samuel Bennett was a man of approximately 60 years, tall and distinguished, with gray hair perfectly combed back and an impeccable black suit. He carried a leather briefcase in one hand and his posture radiated authority and professionalism. His eyes, dark and intelligent, scanned the scene in front of him with the precision of someone used to evaluating complex situations in seconds. Samuel Bennett. Patrick repeated the name with evident suspicion. I don't know any Samuel Bennett, and my mother is not receiving visitors. As you can see, we have a private meeting tonight. I know perfectly well, replied Samuel with imperturbable calm. That is why I am here. Your father, Arthur Sterling, was my client and close friend. I have urgent legal matters to discuss with Mrs. Eleanor, matters that cannot wait. His gaze shifted past Patrick and found me standing at the end of the hallway. Our eyes met, and in his, I saw something that made tears sting mine again. Genuine compassion and iron determination. Look, Mr. Bennett. Patrick tried to maintain a polite but firm tone. My mother just became a widow. She is very emotionally affected. Any legal matter can wait until tomorrow, or better yet, until next week. I am her son, and I can handle anything you need to discuss. I am afraid it doesn't work that way, replied Samuel. And there was steel in his voice now. The matters I must discuss are with Mrs. Eleanor exclusively. Your father was very specific in his instructions. Only she can be present for this conversation. He took a step forward, and Patrick had to step back before his imposing presence. Unless you want to violate the last wishes of your late father, I suggest you allow me to speak with your mother. The tension in the air was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Caroline appeared from the living room, attracted by the raised voices. What is going on here? Who is this man, Patrick? A lawyer who says he has business to discuss with Mom, replied Patrick with growing irritation. At the worst possible moment, I might add. Samuel completely ignored Caroline and addressed me directly. Mrs. Eleanor, can we speak in private? I bring important documents from your husband, Arthur. He asked me to come exactly at this moment, tonight, after the funeral. How did you know the funeral was yesterday? Asked Patrick with suspicion. Who told you? Your father told me, replied Samuel with patience that was clearly starting to run out. 3 months ago, when we prepared all the necessary legal documents, Arthur knew exactly how much time he had left and planned everything meticulously. He turned to me again. Mrs. Eleanor, please. It is important. I walked slowly toward the entrance, still holding the champagne bottles. All eyes were on me. Patrick with suspicion, Caroline with irritation, Samuel with respectful urgency, and some of the guests who had come out of the living room and dining room to see what was causing the commotion. I felt exposed, vulnerable. But at the same time, something was beginning to wake up inside me. A spark of courage that had been asleep under layers of pain and humiliation. I began, but my voice came out as a weak whisper. I cleared my throat and tried again. I want to speak with Mr. Bennett. Mom, don't be ridiculous, intervened Patrick, blocking my path to Samuel. This man could be anyone. He could be a con artist taking advantage of your vulnerable state. You can't just trust a stranger who shows up at the door. Your father trusted me, said Samuel firmly, and I have documentation to prove it. He opened his briefcase and took out a thick folder. Here is Arthur Sterling's will, notarized. Here are the property titles for multiple real estate assets. Here are the bank accounts. And here, he took out a photograph that made me gasp. This is a photo of Arthur and me taken 3 months ago in my office when we finalized all the legal arrangements. The photograph showed Arthur sitting at an elegant desk, smiling weakly but with visible determination in his eyes. Samuel was by his side, both holding documents. It was recent. I could see how sick Arthur looked already at that moment, how thin he had become. But I could also see the peace on his face, as if he knew he was doing the right thing. Patrick snatched the photograph from Samuel's hands. This proves nothing. It could be forged. Dad was sick, confused, probably didn't even know what he was signing. Your father knew perfectly well what he was doing, replied Samuel coldly. In fact, we recorded several video sessions to document his mental competence. His doctors certified that he was in full possession of his faculties. Everything is in perfect legal order. He turned to me, ignoring Patrick completely. Mrs. Eleanor, your husband asked me to come tonight specifically because he knew his son would try to prevent him from accessing the information that belongs to you. Can we talk? In your husband's study, perhaps? All the guests had gathered now in the hallway and entrance, watching the drama unfold as if it were a show. I could feel their eyes on me, their whispers of curiosity, their expressions ranging from fascination to discomfort. Caroline tried to grab my arm. "Eleanor, this is inappropriate. We have guests, a celebration in progress. Whatever this man wants can wait." But something inside me broke in that moment. Maybe it was the weight of the envelope in my apron, reminding me of Arthur's words. Maybe it was the way Samuel looked at me, not with pity but with respect. Or maybe it was simply that I couldn't take any more humiliation, any more orders, being treated as if I didn't matter. "No," I said, and my voice sounded stronger than it had all day. "It cannot wait. I will speak with Mr. Bennet now." The silence that followed my words was absolute. Patrick looked at me with his mouth slightly open, as if he couldn't believe that I, his submissive and obedient mother, had dared to contradict him in front of all his guests. Caroline had an expression of pure indignation, her cheeks flushed with barely contained rage. The guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, some whispering among themselves, others simply watching with morbid curiosity. "Mom," said Patrick with a dangerously low voice, "don't be foolish. These guests came to celebrate my success. You can't just— Your mother just said she will speak with me," interrupted Samuel with authority that admitted no argument. "And she has every legal right to do so. In fact, Mr. Patrick, I suggest you continue with your celebration while Mrs. Eleanor and I attend to these private matters." His eyes hardened. "Unless you prefer we discuss everything here, in front of all these people. I am sure your guests would find it very interesting to hear about the properties, the bank accounts, and especially about the manipulation attempts your father carefully documented during his illness." The color drained from Patrick's face instantly. "What? What are you insinuating?" "I am not insinuating anything," replied Samuel with deadly calm. "I am stating facts. Facts that your father recorded meticulously because he knew this moment would come. Now, let's go to the study. Mrs. Eleanor." I nodded, leaving the champagne bottles on the hall table. My legs were trembling, but I forced myself to walk with as much dignity as I could muster. Samuel followed me, and when Patrick tried to come after us, the lawyer stopped at the study door. "This is private, Mr. Patrick. As I said, only Mrs. Eleanor." "It is my house," exploded Patrick, finally losing his composure. "You can't come in here and give me orders in my own house." "Your house." Samuel raised an eyebrow with an almost amused expression. "Interesting that you say that. That is precisely one of the topics I need to discuss with your mother." And with that, he closed the door in Patrick's face, leaving him outside with his impotent fury. Arthur's study felt different now with Samuel inside, less like a mausoleum of pain and more like a place where justice would finally arrive. Samuel placed his briefcase on the desk and indicated for me to sit in the comfortable leather chair that had been Arthur's favorite spot. I obeyed, feeling the tears threaten to overflow again. "Mrs. Eleanor," began Samuel with a soft but professional voice. "First of all, allow me to express my sincerest condolences. Arthur was an extraordinary man, a dear friend as well as a client. His loss affects me deeply." "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice broken by emotion. "Arthur. He left me a letter. I found it a few hours ago in this desk." I pulled the envelope from my apron with trembling hands. "He mentioned your name. He said you would come." Samuel nodded with a sad smile. Arthur had it all planned. He asked me to come specifically tonight because he knew Patrick would organize some kind of event, something that would make him feel powerful and in control. Arthur wanted the truth to come to light in the most impactful moment possible. He opened his briefcase and began taking out documents, organizing them carefully on the desk. "Mrs. Eleanor, your husband spent the last 6 months of his life preparing to protect you. What I am going to reveal to you tonight is going to change everything." I already read part of the letter, I confessed. He talks about properties, about bank accounts. But I don't understand, why did Arthur never tell me anything? Why did he keep secrets? "Because Patrick began pressuring him from the moment the diagnosis became public," explained Samuel, his face darkening. "Arthur came to my office a year ago, worried. He told me his son had changed, that he only talked about money, about properties, about inheritances. When Arthur fell seriously ill, Patrick intensified his campaign. He tried to convince his father to sign powers of attorney, to transfer properties, to make wills that favored him exclusively. My heart shrank with pain. Patrick did that? To his own dying father? I am afraid so, confirmed Samuel with sadness. And not only that, Arthur documented conversations where Patrick threatened him subtly, where he suggested that perhaps medical treatments were too expensive, where he insinuated that it would be better to let nature take its course. Arthur recorded these conversations on his cell phone. Everything is archived securely. Nausea invaded me. My son, my own son, had been capable of that. I can't believe it, I whispered, though deep down I knew it was true. I had seen the cruelty in Patrick's eyes tonight. What did Arthur do? Arthur was very smart, continued Samuel, with a note of admiration in his voice. He signed some documents, Patrick demanded, but they were documents with no real legal value. For example, that paper that supposedly transferred this house to Patrick's name. What Patrick doesn't know is that the document was only valid while Arthur was alive. It was, essentially, a temporary permission for Patrick to manage the property. The moment Arthur passed away, the document became automatically void and the property reverted to its original owner. He looked me directly in the eyes. You, Mrs. Eleanor, this house has always been in your name. Patrick never had true ownership over it. The world seemed to stop. The house is mine. The house is yours, confirmed Samuel, taking out an official document with seals and signatures. Here is the original property title. Here is the document Patrick signed, believing he was getting the house. And here, he took out another paper, is the clause he never read because he was too anxious to get what he wanted. The clause that says clearly that the transfer was temporary and conditional. I took the documents with trembling hands, reading the words swimming in front of my teary eyes. It was true. Everything was true. Arthur had protected me. And the other properties he mentioned in his letter? Samuel smiled, and for the first time since he had arrived, his expression lit up with something resembling satisfaction. Ah, yes, the other properties. He began to take out more documents. Your husband was a very astute man, Mrs. Eleanor. During the last 20 years, while Patrick believed his father was simply a modest businessman, Arthur was building a silent empire. He invested wisely, bought properties at opportune moments, saved methodically. But I never knew. I began, feeling guilty for my ignorance. He didn't want you to worry about money, explained Samuel gently. Arthur knew you were happy with a simple life, but he also knew that someday he might need to protect you, especially if Patrick turned out to be what he turned out to be. He placed 3 property titles in front of me. Condo in the financial district, currently rented for $6,000 a month. Retail space on Main Avenue, rented for $4,500 a month, and a beautiful house on the coast, valued at $600,000. The numbers danced in front of my eyes. 6,000, 4,500, 600,000. And that is just the beginning, continued Samuel, clearly enjoying the revelation. There are 3 different bank accounts. The first has $150,000, the second has $90,000, and the third, an investment account, currently has a value of $210,000. In total, Mrs. Eleanor, you have assets of approximately $1.5 million. The air left my lungs. $1.5 million. While Patrick treated me like a servant, while Caroline planned to send me to a nursing home, while I worried about where I would live and how I would survive, it turns out I was a millionaire. It can't be real, I whispered. It is completely real, assured Samuel. And there is more. Arthur also left very specific instructions in his will. He took out a thick, official document with multiple notary seals. This is Arthur Sterling's legal will, registered 4 months ago, notarized, with 2 independent witnesses present. In it, Arthur leaves everything to you. Everything. But there is a special clause regarding Patrick. My heart beat so hard I thought it might pop out of my chest. What does it say? Samuel opened the will to a marked page and began to read. To my son Patrick, read Samuel with a clear and firm voice, I leave the sum of $1. This symbolic amount is intentional and not an error or omission. During my terminal illness, Patrick demonstrated greed and cruelty I never imagined possible in a son of mine. He tried to manipulate me into signing documents that would strip my beloved wife Eleanor of her financial security. He threatened me subtly with abandoning me on my deathbed if I did not meet his demands. He showed more interest in my money than in my well-being. For these reasons, and because I wish to protect Eleanor from his avarice, I have decided to exclude him from my inheritance. Everything I own goes to my wife, who has been my faithful, loving, and loyal companion for 47 years. Tears ran freely down my face now, but they weren't tears of sadness but of validation. Arthur had seen what I had tried to deny for so long. Our son had turned into a monster of ambition and selfishness. Arthur knew, I whispered. He knew everything. He knew and documented everything meticulously, confirmed Samuel, closing the will. There is more. Arthur left specific instructions that this will was to be revealed publicly if Patrick tried to abuse you after his death. He asked me to come precisely tonight because he knew Patrick would organize some event, some demonstration of power. He paused, looking at me intensely. Mrs. Eleanor, I have heard shouting since I arrived. I have seen how they treated you before I came in. Did your son force you to serve all these guests? The day after your husband's funeral? I nodded, unable to speak due to the lump in my throat. Samuel closed his eyes for a moment, his jaw tense with contained rage. Exactly what Arthur feared. Exactly what he prepared me for. He opened his eyes and looked at me with iron determination. Mrs. Eleanor, with your permission, I would like to return to that living room full of guests and publicly read the relevant parts of this will. Arthur specifically requested that Patrick be confronted with the truth in front of witnesses, to prevent him from manipulating or twisting the situation later. Fear invaded me. In front of everyone? But Patrick, he will be furious. I don't know what he might do. That is why I will be there, assured Samuel firmly. And that is why I have these legal documents backing everything up. Patrick cannot do anything, Mrs. Eleanor. He has no power here. He never did. He only believed he did because Arthur and I allowed him to believe it temporarily. He leaned forward, his voice softening. Arthur wanted you to regain your dignity. He wanted Patrick to face the consequences of his cruelty. But the decision is yours. If you prefer we handle this in private, we will. Although I must warn you that Patrick will try to manipulate the situation, create his own narrative. Public humiliation will leave him no room to lie. I thought about all the humiliations I had suffered that night. About Patrick screaming at me to stop crying for my husband. About Caroline threatening me with a nursing home. About the guests treating me like an invisible servant. About that woman in the gold dress discussing Patrick's success while I cleared her dirty plates. I thought about how I had stumbled under the weight of the trays, how my hands shook with exhaustion, how I had cried alone in the kitchen while they laughed and celebrated. And I thought about Arthur, my beloved Arthur, who even on his deathbed had thought of protecting me, who had meticulously planned this moment of justice, who loved me enough to ensure I would never be left vulnerable to the cruelty of our own son. Do it, I said, with a voice that trembled but strengthened with every word. Read the will in front of everyone. Arthur wanted Patrick to face the truth, and I want it too. No more lies, no more humiliation. Samuel smiled approvingly and nodded. That is exactly the strength Arthur told me you had. You just needed a push to remember it. He stood up, gathering the most important documents. Come with me, Mrs. Eleanor. It is time you took back your house, your dignity, and your life. We headed toward the study door. I could hear the voices in the living room, the music someone had put on, the artificial laughter of a celebration that was about to turn into something very different. My heart beat loudly, a mixture of fear and anticipation running through my veins. Samuel opened the door, and Patrick was there immediately, as if he had been waiting by it all this time. Are you done with your little secrets? Asked Patrick with barely contained sarcasm. Because my guests are waiting for that champagne I asked you for half an hour ago, Mom. Mr. Patrick, said Samuel with a voice that cut like ice, I suggest you gather all your guests in the living room. I have legal information that must be shared with everyone present. What? No. Whatever it is, you can discuss it tomorrow with my lawyer. Patrick tried to block our path, but Samuel simply walked around him, walking with authority toward the living room. Ladies and gentlemen, Samuel's voice resonated through the entire house. If you could all gather in the living room, please. I have an important announcement to make on behalf of the late Arthur Sterling. The music stopped. Conversation ceased. One by one, all the guests began to congregate in the living room, their expressions varying between curiosity, confusion, and discomfort. Caroline appeared with a flushed face, clearly annoyed by the interruption of her triumphant night. What the hell is going on here? Patrick, who is this man? He is my father's lawyer, replied Patrick with clenched teeth, and he is about to make a huge mistake. Samuel positioned himself in the center of the living room, his presence dominating the space. I stayed near the entrance, feeling exposed, but also strangely strengthened. All eyes were on us. The 30 guests, Patrick, Caroline, everyone waiting, everyone watching. My name is Samuel Bennett, and I was the personal attorney and close friend of Arthur Sterling for over 20 years. He began with a clear and authoritative voice. I am here tonight to execute Arthur's last wishes, specifically those related to his wife, Mrs. Eleanor Sterling, and his son, Patrick Sterling. This is ridiculous, interrupted Patrick, walking toward the center of the room. My guests do not need to be involved in private family matters. I ask you to leave my house immediately. Your house. Samuel raised an eyebrow. That is an interesting statement, Mr. Patrick. In fact, that is precisely one of the things I need to clarify. He held the property title up high, high enough for everyone to see. This is the deed to this residence. And contrary to what you have been telling your mother, and probably these good people present here, this house is not yours. A murmur ran through the room. Patrick paled. That is a lie. My father transferred this house to me 3 years ago. I have the documents. You have a temporary transfer document, corrected Samuel with devastating calm. A document that was only valid while your father was alive. A document that, if you had bothered to read completely instead of signing with blind greed, would have shown you that the property would automatically revert to your mother upon the moment of your father's passing. He paused, letting the words sink in. This house belongs legally, completely, and absolutely to Mrs. Eleanor Sterling. You, Mr. Patrick, have no ownership right over it whatsoever. The silence that followed was deafening. Patrick opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water, searching for words that didn't come. Caroline let out a stifled scream, her hand flying to her mouth. The guests exchanged shocked looks, some starting to whisper among themselves. That cannot be true, Patrick managed to say finally, his voice cracking. My father would never do that. He knew I needed this house for my business, for my future. Your father knew exactly what he was doing, replied Samuel coldly. In fact, your father documented extensively his reasons for structuring his inheritance this particular way. Samuel opened the will, its pages rustling in the tense silence of the room. With Mrs. Eleanor's permission, I would like to read the relevant section of Arthur Sterling's will. You don't have my permission, shouted Patrick, his face red with anger and shame. This is a private matter. You can't just come here and humiliate me in front of my business partners. Humiliate is exactly what you did to your mother tonight, replied Samuel, with a voice sharp as glass. You forced her to work as a servant the day after burying her husband. You insulted her. You degraded her. You threatened to take away her home. And you did it in front of all these people. He pointed to the guests who were now shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Your father predicted this exact behavior. That is why he asked me to come tonight specifically, so there would be witnesses to your cruelty and witnesses to the truth. Caroline ran to Patrick, grabbing his arm. Patrick, do something. Throw him out. Call the police. This is trespassing. It is not trespassing when the legal owner of the house invited me in, pointed out Samuel, turning to me. Mrs. Eleanor, do you wish for me to continue? All eyes turned to me. I could feel the weight of their gazes, the intensity of the moment. All my life I had been the quiet wife, the obedient mother, the woman who avoided conflict and sought peace. But Arthur had died protecting me, giving me the tools to defend myself. I couldn't betray his last act of love by remaining silent. Yes, I said with a voice that resonated louder than I expected. Continue, Mr. Bennett. Read my husband's will. Samuel nodded with approval and began to read. I, Arthur Sterling, in full possession of my mental faculties and duly advised by my attorney Samuel Bennett, declare this document as my last will and testament. He paused and then continued with the section that would shake Patrick's world foundations. To my son Patrick, I leave the sum of $1. This symbolic amount is not an error nor an omission, but a deliberate decision based on his behavior during my terminal illness. "Enough!" shouted Patrick, but his voice sounded desperate now, stripped of all authority. "You have no right." Samuel ignored him and continued reading. During the last 6 months of my life, Patrick demonstrated greed that terrified me. He tried to manipulate me into signing documents that would strip my wife Eleanor of her financial security. He threatened me subtly, with denying me access to medical treatments if I did not transfer properties to his name. I recorded these conversations, and the tapes are archived securely with my lawyer. Patrick showed more interest in my death than in my life, more concern for my money than for my pain. The murmurs among the guests turned into stifled exclamations. An older woman, sitting near the window, brought her hand to her chest with a horrified expression. The heavy-set man who had criticized my appetizers looked at Patrick with evident disgust. The tide was turning, and I could see the panic growing in my son's eyes. "Those are lies," said Patrick with a trembling voice. "My father was sick, confused by the medications. He didn't know what he was saying." "Your father was evaluated by 3 independent doctors," replied Samuel coldly. "All certified that he was mentally competent until 2 days before his death. And the recordings I mentioned are very clear. Do you wish for me to play them here? I have my laptop in the briefcase." Patrick's face crumbled completely. "No, there is no need for that." "I imagined so," said Samuel with evident satisfaction. He continued reading the will. "For these reasons, and because my love and loyalty belong completely to my wife Eleanor, I leave to her the entirety of my assets. This includes this residence valued at $450,000, a condo in the financial district generating rents of $6,000 monthly, a retail space rented for $4,500 monthly, a house on the coast valued at $600,000, and bank accounts with a combined total of $450,000. The room erupted in murmurs. The numbers were impressive. Caroline staggered backward, her face losing all color. Patrick dropped onto the nearest sofa, his expression one of complete devastation. The guests looked at us all with a mixture of shock, fascination, and deep discomfort. That is over $1.5 million in assets," whispered one of the guests loud enough for everyone to hear. "Exactly," confirmed Samuel. "Mrs. Eleanor Sterling is, in fact, a very wealthy woman. While her son treated her like a servant, while he planned to send her to a nursing home as if she were a burden, she was actually the owner of everything." He turned to Patrick with a hard expression. "Your father also left specific instructions regarding this property. You have 30 days to vacate this house. You may take your personal belongings, but nothing else. Any furniture or item that belonged to Arthur or that was purchased with family money remains here." 30 days, shouted Caroline, finally finding her voice. 30 days to find a place to live? That is inhumane. We are family, family, repeated Samuel with a tone loaded with irony. How interesting that you use that word now, Mrs. Caroline. Where was that sense of family when you told Mrs. Eleanor that this house was no longer hers? When you suggested she should go to a nursing home? When you treated her like a domestic employee? He turned to the guests. All of you were witnesses tonight. You saw how this 72-year-old woman, barely 24 hours after burying her husband, was forced to serve and wait on 30 people. You saw her suffering, and nobody said anything. The silence was so thick it could be cut. Some of the guests had the decency to look ashamed, looking toward the floor. Others simply wanted to disappear, clearly regretting having attended this dinner that had turned into a spectacle of family humiliation. Patrick stood up slowly, his body trembling with contained rage. "Mom," he said with a voice trying to sound conciliatory, but coming out as a desperate plea. "Mom, please. This is a misunderstanding. I was just trying to keep the house running, trying to secure our financial future. Dad would have wanted us to work together, to support each other. What your father would have wanted?" Samuel's voice was sharp. "Allow me to read another section of the will." He flipped pages until he found the passage he was looking for. If Patrick attempts to manipulate Eleanor after my death, if he tries to use guilt or fake tears to regain access to my inheritance, I instruct my attorney to take immediate legal action. I know my son. I know his capacity to act, to feign remorse. I do not want Eleanor to fall for his manipulations. She is too kind, too compassionate. That is why I ask Samuel to be her shield, to protect my last wishes no matter how much Patrick begs or threatens. The words of Arthur resonated in the room like a final sentence. Patrick closed his eyes, defeated. When he opened them again, the mask had fallen completely. There were no longer pleas. There were no attempts at manipulation. There was only pure rage. "Fine," he said with a poisoned voice. "Fine. You want me to leave, Mom? You want to kick me out like garbage? Go ahead, but remember this. When you are alone in this huge house, when you have no one to take care of you, when you are just an old lady with money but no family, don't come crying to me, 'Dad left you money.' But do you know what he didn't leave you? Youth, health, time. What good is all that money if you have no one to share it with?" "He is right about one thing," I said, and my voice rang clear and firm in the silent room. Everyone turned to me, surprised to hear me speak. "Your father didn't leave me youth or extra time, but he left me something much more valuable: dignity. He left me the freedom to live my last years without being abused by my own son. He left me financial security so that I never have to depend on someone who treats me with cruelty." I walked slowly toward the center of the room, positioning myself next to Samuel. "Patrick, when you were a child, I took care of you when you were sick. I held you when you had nightmares. I worked alongside your father to give you education, opportunities, love. I never imagined the day would come when you would treat me the way you treated me tonight." My voice trembled, but I didn't stop. "You screamed at me to stop crying for your father. You forced me to serve strangers while my heart was shattered. You threatened to take my home away. And all this barely 24 hours after the funeral." "Mom, Patrick began. But I raised my hand to silence him. "I haven't finished," I said with firmness I never knew I possessed. "Your father knew exactly what kind of man you had become. And do you know what hurts me more than your cruelty? That he was right. That the sweet boy I raised died at some point and was replaced by this greedy man I see in front of me." I breathed deeply, feeling the tears run down my cheeks, but without being ashamed of them. "So yes, Patrick, I want you to leave. You have 30 days, as Mr. Bennett said, and I want you to take Caroline with you." Caroline took a step forward, her face contorted with rage. "How dare you? After everything we did for you, this is how you pay us back? We are your family, Eleanor. Your only family." "No," I corrected her with a soft but firm voice. "You are not my family. Family doesn't abuse. Family doesn't humiliate. Family doesn't threaten." I looked at all the guests observing the scene with varied expressions of shock and shame. "All of you were witnesses tonight. You saw how they treated me, and none of you said anything. None of you asked if I was okay, if I needed to rest, if it was appropriate for a woman my age to work like this after a funeral. The heavy-set man who had criticized my appetizers had at least the decency to look ashamed. The woman in the gold dress stared at her hands, unable to hold my gaze. One by one, the guests began to stand up, gathering their belongings, mumbling excuses about having to leave early. "No, please stay," said Patrick, with growing desperation. "The night doesn't have to end like this. We can resolve this in private. My partners, the contract we just signed." About that contract intervened one of the men in suits who had been in the negotiations. He was tall, with silver hair and a serious expression. "Mr. Patrick, the deal we discussed tonight was based on certain representations you made regarding your financial position and your properties. Specifically, you claimed to be the owner of this residence and other assets. Now we discover that those claims were false." Patrick's face crumbled. "No, wait, I can explain." "There is nothing to explain," continued the man coldly. "My firm does not do business with people who misrepresent their financial situation. Consider our contract void." He turned to his colleagues. "Gentlemen, we are leaving." In a matter of minutes, the room began to empty. The guests scurried out like rats abandoning a sinking ship, some without even saying goodbye, others mumbling uncomfortable words of condolence directed at me, not at Patrick. The empire my son had tried to build with lies and manipulation was crumbling before his eyes. Caroline grabbed Patrick's arm tightly, her nails digging into his expensive suit. "Do something, Patrick. We can't lose everything like this. Talk to her, convince her." Patrick turned to me one last time, and for a moment I thought I saw a flash of true remorse in his eyes. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by cold resentment. "This isn't over, Mom. You can have the house, you can have Dad's money, but you have no one. You will die alone in this big empty house. And when that happens, everything will come back to me anyway." "Mr. Patrick," intervened Samuel with a voice of steel, "I suggest you read the complete will before making threats. Your father also included provisions for that scenario. In the event of Mrs. Eleanor's passing, all assets will be donated to specified charities. You will receive nothing. Not now, nor ever." The last piece of hope vanished from Patrick's face. Caroline let out a stifled scream of horror. "It can't be. That is unfair. He is his son." "He was my son," I said with a voice broken by emotion. "But the son I loved no longer exists." I turned to Samuel, unable to keep looking at Patrick. "Mr. Bennett, please escort Patrick and Caroline to the exit, and make sure they take only their personal belongings." Samuel nodded and headed toward Patrick with authority that admitted no discussion. "Let's go, Mr. Patrick. It is time to leave." "You can't just kick us out into the street," protested Caroline. "We have rights. We will live here until we find another place." "You have 30 days to find accommodation," replied Samuel firmly. "But tonight you will sleep in a hotel. Mrs. Eleanor has suffered enough for one day. You can return tomorrow with a list of your personal belongings, and we will coordinate the move." Patrick opened his mouth to protest, but something in Samuel's expression stopped him. With slumped shoulders, completely defeated, he headed toward the entrance. Caroline followed him, shooting me poisonous looks over her shoulder, but not daring to say anything else. The last remaining guests took the opportunity to slip away as well, leaving the house in sepulchral silence. When the door closed behind them, my legs finally gave way. Samuel caught me before I fell, guiding me gently toward the sofa. "Mrs. Eleanor, breathe. It is over. It is done." I was sobbing uncontrollably now, all the emotions of the day, of the night, of the last few months coming out in an unstoppable cascade. "Arthur," I managed to say between sobs. "My Arthur protected me until the end." "Yes, he did," confirmed Samuel with a soft voice, letting me cry. "He loved you deeply, and he wanted to make sure you were safe." He waited until my sobs calmed down a little before continuing. "Mrs. Eleanor, there are a few more things we need to discuss, but they can wait until tomorrow. For now, I suggest you rest. It has been a very difficult night." I nodded, wiping my tears with the back of my hand. The house was in disarray, plates and glasses everywhere, furniture moved from its place, the smell of food and alcohol floating in the air. But it was my house, my home, and finally, it was free of the toxic presence of Patrick and Caroline. "Mr. Bennett," I said with a hoarse voice, "thank you. Thank you for coming tonight, for fulfilling Arthur's last wish, for protecting me." Samuel smiled with genuine warmth. "You don't have to thank me. Arthur was my friend, and you are an extraordinary woman who deserves dignity and respect." He picked up his briefcase. "I will return tomorrow afternoon to discuss the financial details, the properties, and the next steps. Does around 3 sound good?" "Yes, that is fine," I replied, feeling a deep exhaustion settle into my bones. "I will be here." After Samuel left, I stayed sitting in the living room in complete silence. The house that had been full of strange voices and fake laughter was now mine again. I walked slowly through every room, turning off lights, collecting some plates, but mostly just feeling the space, reclaiming it. In Arthur's study, I sat in his leather chair and looked at the photographs on the wall. Our wedding, young and full of hope. Patrick's birth, when we still believed he would be a loving son. Family vacations, graduations, celebrations. At what moment had everything gone wrong? I opened the desk drawer and took out Arthur's letter once more. "My dearest Eleanor," it began. I read every word again, savoring his love, his concern, his meticulous planning to protect me. At the end of the letter was a postscript I hadn't seen before. "Don't cry for Patrick. Cry for the son we could have had, but not for the man he became. He made his choices, and now he must live with the consequences. You, my love, live. Live fully, live with joy, live knowing you were loved completely." I pressed the letter against my heart and closed my eyes. "I will, Arthur," I whispered to the empty study. "I will live. For both of us." That night I slept in our bed, in our room, in our house. And although Arthur was no longer physically by my side, I could feel his presence in every corner, in every shadow, in every whisper of the wind against the windows. He had given me the greatest gift a husband could give: the freedom to live with dignity, the security of not depending on anyone who treated me with cruelty, and the validation that my pain mattered, that I mattered. The 30 days passed quickly. Patrick and Caroline came and went in silence, gathering their belongings under Samuel's supervision. There were no more dramatic scenes, no more pleas, no more threats, only the silent acknowledgement that they had lost, that their plans of manipulation had crumbled in the face of the foresight and love of a man who knew them better than they knew themselves. When they finally left, I closed the door behind them and leaned against it, breathing deeply. The house was completely mine now. The future was completely mine. And although I would face that future without Arthur physically by my side, I would face it with the strength he always knew I had, with the dignity he made sure to protect, and with the love that would endure beyond death. "Thank you, my love," I whispered to the air. "Thank you for loving me until the end. Thank you for protecting me. Thank you for reminding me who I am." And in the silence of my reclaimed home, I could swear I heard his voice, soft and loving, whispering back, "Always, my Eleanor, always."